3,707 United States troops. That number alone carries weight. It isn't a handful of special operators moving quietly under the cover of night. It isn't a dozen armored vehicles patrolling a checkpoint. It's a force a small army assembled with one purpose: to deliver a decisive blow against one of the most dangerous criminal organizations on the continent. For weeks, U.S. intelligence agencies had been following a trail. Satellites, drones, and informants stitched together fragments of information until a full picture emerged. The cartel's supply line, a convoy of trucks carrying narcotics worth millions, was preparing to move through one of its most heavily used smuggling routes. The convoy wasn't small, it wasn't careless. It was a heavily guarded procession of vehicles, pickups with mounted machine guns in the lead and rear, SUV escorts filled with gunmen in tactical gear, and the prized cargo trucks locked in the center. To the cartel, it was business as usual. To the Americans, it was the opportunity they had been waiting for. The cartel had grown bold over the years. Shipments moved regularly. Bribes kept corrupt officials silent. Gunmen rode openly through towns with weapons on full display. The convoy that would soon be targeted had made this journey dozens of times before. The drivers believed nothing could touch them. Local police looked the other way. The cartel controlled the ground, or so they thought. Behind the scenes, U.S. forces had been assembling. Every movement of personnel was disguised as routine training. Units shifted quietly into position, spread across the borderlands where they could cut off escape routes and strike from multiple angles at once. Some were stationed in armored vehicles hidden beneath camouflage netting. Others waited in helicopters, rotors spinning silently in the cool pre-dawn air. Overhead, surveillance drones painted a live picture of the battlefield, their infrared cameras tracking every truck and every gunman as they moved closer to the kill zone. The planning had been meticulous. Nothing was left to chance. The ambush site had been chosen carefully, a long, open stretch of desert road bordered by low ridges and scattered brush. On one side, a dry riverbed offered natural concealment for armored personnel carriers. On the other, a cluster of abandoned structures provided cover for infantry teams equipped with javelin missiles and heavy machine guns. If the convoy made it into this stretch of road, there would be no escape. At the command post, officers monitored the feed. Time ticked by. Reports came in from recon teams shadowing the convoy. The trucks were moving, slower than expected but on schedule. Dozens of vehicles, all packed tightly, rolling into the trap. Every soldier knew their role. Snipers had already marked priority targets: the lead driver, the rear gun truck, and the SUV carrying the convoy commander. Taking them out first would cause maximum chaos, leaving the convoy leaderless and boxed in. Heavy weapons teams prepared to hit the cargo trucks. Infantry squads rehearsed hand signals and radio codes one last time. Pilots checked their comms, ready to swoop in at the signal. And then, just after sunrise, the call came in. The convoy was in the box. The trap springs. The first indication of trouble came not from the ground, but from above. At 0647 hours, a Predator drone circling at 15,000 feet detected the distinctive heat signatures of the convoy's lead vehicles cresting a ridge 2 miles from the ambush zone. 37 vehicles in total, moving in a disciplined formation that spoke to military-level organization. This wasn't just a smuggling operation. It was a cartel army on the move. In the forward observation post, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her scope and whispered into her radio. Overwatch to command. Eyes on the package. Count 37 vehicles. Estimate 100+ personnel. Heavy weapons visible on lead and trail vehicles. They're moving fast now. The convoy commander, a sicario known only as El Martillo, the Hammer, rode in the third SUV, confident in his crew's firepower and the route they'd used successfully for months. His men carried AK-47s, RPGs, and .50 caliber machine guns mounted on pickup trucks. They'd fought Mexican military units before and won. They had no reason to suspect that today would be any different. But 3 miles ahead, concealed in positions that had taken weeks to prepare, the largest anti-cartel operation in U.S. history was about to unfold. Colonel Marcus Webb, commanding the operation from an armored command vehicle, watched the approaching convoy on multiple screens. Thermal imaging showed the exact position of every vehicle. Communications intercepts revealed their radio chatter. Even their fuel levels were being monitored by intelligence analysts, who had been tracking this convoy since it departed from a compound deep in cartel territory 72 hours earlier. "All units, this is Hammer 6. Colonel Webb's voice crackled across encrypted channels to 3,707 American service members positioned in a kill zone that stretched for 8 miles. Target convoy is approaching phase line Alpha. Snipers, you have green light on priority targets. Heavy weapons, prepare for simultaneous engagement on my mark." The ambush had been designed like a closing fist. As the convoy entered the narrow canyon road, they would find their escape routes systematically cut off. Behind them, a squad of Rangers would destroy a bridge with C4 charges. Ahead, combat engineers had prepared a massive crater that would stop the lead vehicles cold. On both flanks, the high ground bristled with American firepower. M240 machine guns, Javelin anti-tank missiles, and Mark 19 grenade launchers. But the crown jewel of the operation was the air support. 6 AH-64 Apache helicopters waited in concealed positions 5 miles out, their pilots monitoring radio traffic and preparing for the most devastating display of coordinated air-ground assault in the war on drugs. Each Apache carried 16 Hellfire missiles and 1,200 rounds of 30mm cannon ammunition. In the sky above, an AC-130 gunship circled like a mechanical angel of death, its 105mm howitzer and 40mm cannon ready to rain destruction from on high. At 6:52, the convoy's lead vehicle, a modified pickup truck with a .50 caliber machine gun welded to its bed, crossed into the kill zone. The opening shot came from Sergeant First Class Thomas Chen, positioned on a ridge 800 meters from the road. Through his Leopold scope, he could see the driver of the lead truck clearly, a bearded man in sunglasses, one hand on the wheel, completely unaware that he had seconds to live. Chen's finger found the trigger of his M24 sniper rifle. The suppressed crack of the rifle was lost in the desert wind. 7.62mm match-grade ammunition covered the distance in 1.2 seconds, punching through the driver's side window and ending the life of a man who had personally oversaw the torture and execution of dozens of Mexican police officers. The truck immediately swerved off the road and flipped, its gunner thrown clear and landing in a broken heap on the hard-packed earth. That single shot was the signal the entire force had been waiting for. "Execute! Execute! Execute!" Colonel Webb's voice boomed across the radio network. Chaos erupted along the 8-mile stretch of desert road. From concealed positions on both sides of the canyon, American forces opened fire with devastating precision. The second vehicle in the convoy, another gun truck A, disappeared in a fireball as a Javelin missile struck it dead center, the explosion lifting the entire vehicle 3 feet off the ground before it crashed down and twisted burning wreckage. Simultaneously, the bridge behind the convoy vanished in a thunderous explosion of concrete and steel. Ranger demolition experts had planted 200 pounds of C4 charges in the structure's critical support points. When the charges detonated, they created a gap 40 feet wide and 30 feet deep, impossible to cross and effectively trapping the entire convoy in the kill zone. The cartel gunmen reacted faster than expected. Within seconds of the first shots, they were deploying from their vehicles and returning fire. Muzzle flashes erupted from behind truck doors and engine blocks as AK-47s chattered on full automatic. An RPG streaked across the canyon, impacting harmlessly against a boulder, but sending a clear message. These weren't ordinary smugglers who would surrender at the first sign of trouble. But their courage and firepower meant nothing against the overwhelming force arrayed against them. Sergeant Rodriguez, the forward observer who had first spotted the convoy, now had a front-row seat to its destruction. Through her binoculars, she watched cartel fighters scrambling for cover as American bullets turned their vehicles into scrap metal. "Jesus," she whispered into her radio. "It's like shooting fish in a barrel." 3 miles away, El Martillo was screaming orders into his radio as his world fell apart around him. His lead trucks were gone. The bridge behind them was destroyed. Everywhere he looked, his men were dying under accurate, overwhelming fire from positions he couldn't even see. In his entire career as a cartel enforcer, He had never faced anything like this. Mexican military units could be bought off or outfought. Local police would run at the first sign of serious resistance. But these weren't Mexican forces. These were Americans, and they had come prepared for war. All units, he shouted into his radio. We are under attack by military forces. Request immediate air support. Request immediate reinforcement. But no help was coming. Unknown to El Martillo, U.S. cyber warfare specialists had been jamming cartel communications for the past hour. His desperate radio calls were being intercepted, analyzed, and blocked. His organization's command structure had been severed with the precision of a surgical scalpel. He was on his own, trapped in a kill zone with 3,707 American service members, closing in from all sides. As the ambush entered its third minute, the full weight of American military power began to reveal itself. The initial sniper shots and missile strikes had been merely the opening notes of a symphony of destruction that had been months in the planning. From their concealed position 3 miles north, the Apache helicopters received their attack order. 6 AH-64D longbow Apaches lifted off simultaneously, their rotors chopping the air as they accelerated toward the battle. Each helicopter carried a crew of 2, a pilot in the rear seat and a co-pilot/gunner in the front, both wearing night vision goggles despite the daylight hour to better track targets through the smoke and dust of battle. Captain Sarah Martinez piloted the lead Apache, call sign Reaper 16. Through her targeting system, she could see the convoy spread out along the canyon road like toys scattered by an angry child. Burning vehicles sent pillars of black smoke into the clear morning air. Muzzle flashes from cartel weapons sparkled like deadly fireflies as the gunmen fought desperately against impossible odds. Reaper flight, this is Reaper 16, she transmitted to her fellow pilots. I have eyes on multiple targets, engaging the large truck cluster at grid 347-892. Brake right after your runs and set up for another pass. The Apaches attacked in pairs, diving toward the convoy at 120 knots, while their 30mm chain guns spun up to firing speed. The distinctive sound of the Apache's cannon, a deep buzzing roar like an enormous zipper being pulled, echoed across the desert as hundreds of high-explosive rounds shredded everything in their path. Trucks exploded, bodies disappeared in clouds of dust and debris. The few cartel fighters who tried to engage the helicopters with small arms fire were eliminated with surgical precision. But the air attack was just beginning. At 25,000 feet, the AC-130 gunship Spooky 4-1 had been monitoring the battle through its sophisticated sensor suite. The massive 4-engine aircraft, specially modified for close air support, carried enough firepower to level a city block. Its crew of 13 specialists had been tracking individual cartel fighters through thermal imaging, waiting for their moment to join the fight. Ground control, this is Spooky 4-1, the aircraft commander transmitted. I have visual on approximately 40 personnel dispersed along the target area. Request permission to engage with 40mm. Spooky 4-1, you are cleared hot, came the immediate response. Danger close is not a factor. Light them up. The AC-130's 40mm Bofors cannon began firing with metronomic precision. Each shell weighed 2 pounds and exploded with the force of a hand grenade. From 5 miles up, the gunship's crew could see their rounds impacting with devastating accuracy, guided by computer-controlled targeting systems that could place a shell within 3 feet of any point on the ground. For the surviving cartel fighters, the experience was beyond terrifying. They were being hunted by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't escape. The Americans seemed to know exactly where every cartel fighter was hiding. Bullets came from impossible angles. Explosions erupted with no warning. Men who tried to run across open ground simply vanished in puffs of smoke and dust. El Martillo, crouched behind his bullet-riddled SUV, finally understood the hopelessness of his situation. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. The Americans had come not to arrest them or seize their drugs, but to eliminate them entirely. Every escape route was blocked. Every hiding place was under fire. His radio was dead, his men were dying, and somewhere above the smoke and chaos, he could hear the growing thunder of helicopter rotors. Ground assault. While air power dominated the battlefield, American ground forces were methodically closing in from all sides. The ambush had been designed not just to stop the convoy, but to ensure that no one escaped to warn other cartel units about American capabilities and tactics. From the Eastern Ridge Bravo Company of the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment began their descent toward the trapped vehicles. 50 Rangers in full battle gear moved down the slope in tactical formation, their M4 carbines ready and their movements coordinated through hand signals and whispered radio communications. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were elite light infantry, trained for exactly this type of close-quarters battle in difficult terrain. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres led the first squad down a gully that provided concealment from cartel gunmen still fighting from behind their vehicles. Through his night vision scope, used even in daylight for its thermal capability, he could see 3 sicarios huddled behind an overturned truck, their AK-47s pointing toward the western ridge where most of the American fire was coming from. They had no idea that a squad of Rangers was approaching from their blind spot. Torres raised his fist, stopping his men 30 meters from the enemy position. Through hand signals, he directed his team into a classic L-shaped ambush formation. 2 Rangers with M249 light machine guns took position to provide suppressive fire. 2 more Rangers with M203 grenade launchers prepared to eliminate the enemy position with high explosive rounds. The remaining squad members spread out to cover possible escape routes. "Bravo 6, this is Bravo 2-1, Torres whispered into his radio. "I have eyes on 3 military-age males with weapons at grid reference 349-887. Request permission to engage." "Bravo 2-1, you are cleared to engage. Make it quick and clean." The Rangers struck with overwhelming speed and firepower. The M203 grenades exploded simultaneously behind the overturned truck, killing 2 of the cartel fighters instantly and mortally wounding the 3rd. Before the echoes of the explosions had faded, the Rangers were advancing through the smoke to secure the position and eliminate any survivors. This scene was being repeated all along the canyon as American ground forces closed their net around the trapped convoy. Charlie Company approached from the west, Delta Company from the south. Every avenue of escape was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Snipers on the high ground picked off individual targets trying to move between positions. Machine gun teams suppressed any organized resistance. It was textbook combined arms warfare, executed with the precision that only comes from endless training and superior equipment. The psychological effect on the surviving cartel fighters was devastating. They had started the day as confident predators, armed and dangerous men who controlled territory through fear and violence. Now they were prey, hunted by an enemy that seemed to appear from nowhere and strike with godlike power. Some tried to surrender, throwing down their weapons and raising their hands. Others fought to the death, firing their AK-47s until American bullets cut them down. A few tried to run, only to be eliminated by helicopter gunfire or precision sniper shots. El Martillo made his final stand behind a cargo truck loaded with cocaine worth $40 million on the streets of American cities. His personal bodyguards, 4 sicarios armed with assault rifles and RPGs, formed a defensive perimeter around their commander as American forces closed in from all sides. "You want to die like warriors?" El Martillo shouted to his men over the sound of gunfire and explosions. "Then we die killing Americans." But their last stand lasted less than 2 minutes. A Hellfire missile from an Apache helicopter ended their resistance with surgical precision, turning the truck and its occupants into a crater of twisted metal and scattered coca leaves. The man who had terrorized northern Mexico for 5 years died without firing a shot, his body vaporized by American technology and determination. The aftermath. By 7:23 hours, 36 minutes after the first shot was fired, the battle was over. The desert road that had carried cartel convoys for years was now a graveyard of burning vehicles and scattered debris. 37 trucks, SUVs, and gun platforms had been reduced to twisted metal. Of the estimated 140 cartel fighters who had entered the kill zone, none survived. American casualties: 0 killed, 2 wounded, both from ricocheting debris, neither seriously injured. Colonel Webb stood in his command vehicle, monitoring radio traffic as his units began the systematic process of securing the battlefield and documenting what they had found. The intelligence value of the operation was enormous. Cell phones, computers, documents, and radio equipment captured from the convoy would provide insights into cartel operations across multiple countries. The drugs themselves An estimated 8 tons of cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl A would never reach American streets. All units, this is Hammer 6. Webb transmitted to his scattered forces. Cease fire, cease fire. Begin battle damage assessment and evidence collection. We have approximately 4 hours before Mexican military units respond to this location. I want everything of intelligence value collected and tagged. Teams of specialists move through the wreckage like crime scene investigators, photographing everything, collecting phones and documents, taking DNA samples from bodies for identification. Combat engineers prepared demolition charges to destroy any equipment too large to transport. Intelligence analysts began the process of connecting this convoy to the broader network of cartel operations that stretched from South America to Canada. The Apache helicopters established a defensive perimeter around the site, their sensors scanning for any approaching threats. The AC-130 gunship remained on station overhead, its crew monitoring radio frequencies for signs that other cartel units might be responding to the attack. But the communications intercepts told a different story. The cartel's command structure was in chaos, unsure of what had happened and afraid to risk additional forces. At Fort Bliss, Texas, the operation's strategic command center buzzed with activity as analysts pored over the intelligence windfall. The convoy hadn't just been carrying drugs, it had been a mobile command post for cartel operations across 3 countries. Computers found in El Martillo's vehicle contained detailed information about safe houses, smuggling routes, corrupt officials, and planned operations. The data would fuel law enforcement operations for months to come. Strategic impact. Within hours of the battle's conclusion, the reverberations were being felt across the criminal underworld. Intercepted communications revealed panic among cartel leadership as they tried to understand how their most secure convoy had been utterly destroyed by American forces. The operational security that had protected their smuggling routes for years had been penetrated so completely that they no longer knew which routes were safe and which were compromised. The psychological impact was even more significant than the tactical victory. For years, cartels had operated under the assumption that American military power would never be brought to bear directly against them. They fought Mexican military units, bribed Mexican officials, and intimidated Mexican civilians. But they had never faced the full weight of American technological superiority and military precision. That assumption had been shattered in 36 minutes of overwhelming violence. Intelligence intercepts in the days following the ambush revealed cartel leaders canceling planned operations, rerouting shipments, and consolidating forces in areas they considered safer. The psychological effect of the operation, later designated Desert Hammer in classified military documents, had disrupted cartel operations across an entire region. But the most significant impact was on American policy. The successful operation demonstrated that conventional military force could be devastatingly effective against criminal organizations when deployed with proper intelligence and overwhelming superiority. The 3,707 troops involved in Desert Hammer had eliminated a major cartel operation while capturing intelligence that would fuel law enforcement operations for years. The message was clear and unambiguous. The United States possessed the capability and will to bring its full military power to bear against threats to American security, regardless of where those threats originated or how well defended they believed themselves to be. Lessons learned. The Desert Hammer operation became a case study in military academies and law enforcement training centers around the world. The level of coordination between different military units, infantry, aviation, special operations, intelligence, and support elements had been unprecedented in counter-narcotics operations. The use of real-time intelligence to guide tactical decisions had resulted in perfect situational awareness and overwhelming tactical advantage. Perhaps most importantly, the operation had demonstrated the power of patience and preparation. The months of surveillance, intelligence gathering, and positioning that preceded the ambush had ensured that when American forces struck, they did so with complete surprise and overwhelming superiority. The cartel convoy had been tracked, analyzed, and targeted with the same precision typically reserved for high-value terrorist targets. The success of Desert Hammer also highlighted the importance of interagency cooperation. The operation had involved not just military units, but also CIA intelligence officers, DEA agents, NSA communication specialists, and cyber warfare experts from multiple commands. The seamless integration of these diverse capabilities had created a force multiplier effect that made the operation's success inevitable. In the end, 3,707 American service members had delivered a message that resonated far beyond the desert canyon where the battle took place. They had demonstrated that no criminal organization, regardless of its firepower or territorial control, was beyond the reach of American justice when the full weight of American military power was brought to bear with precision, overwhelming force, and unshakable determination. The convoy that entered that canyon had been the pride of one of Mexico's most powerful cartels. When the smoke cleared, it was nothing more than scattered metal and a stark reminder that there are consequences for those who threaten American security. Consequences delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel and the force of a falling hammer.